As a new marathon runner, it is easy to make mistakes on race day. As you continue to run marathons, you will eventually learn from these mistakes. I didn't learn from all of these mistakes after my first marathon, but after a few marathons, I started to catch on what mistakes that I need to avoid. I will share with you 8 lessons that I learned as a new marathon runner. I am sharing these 8 mistakes with you so that you can avoid them. The first mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is that I didn't dress properly. It is hard to be chilly at the start of the race, but you don't want to wear extremely warm clothes. This is really hard for me because I am a cold-natured person and I naturally want to dress warm. I think it was my second marathon. It was pretty chilly during that race, and I wore a heavy sweatshirt and a long sleeve shirt under it. I don't advise that. Instead, dress in layers. So if you're really cold, wear a thin long sleeve shirt and like a thin jacket over it. That's going to be the best bet for you to stay warm and not get overheated. At least I wore shorts during that race, but my upper body got really hot. So it is always best to dress in thinner layers. You must plan ahead on what you are going to wear and look at the weather forecast before the race. So as you look at the weather, it is also important to see if the weather is going to be warming up or cooling off during the race. So many times the temperature will be warmer by the end of the race, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the weather will actually be cooling off as the day goes on. You want to be careful and check for those weather conditions. It is also very possible to get cold if you are underdressed during the race. I have actually underdressed for a training run and got very cold. So I went out on a fairly warm winter day one time, and it was like about 48 degrees, and it felt pretty good. I'm like, oh, I could wear shorts. It'll probably warm up throughout the day. Well, I was wrong. It was actually cooling off as I was running. It started raining and the wind was picking up. I was so cold. My legs were red. I was shivering. It is not fun to shiver at all when you are running, and it actually could be dangerous if you do it for a long period of time because it could lead to like hypothermia. I did finish the run, but as soon as I got home, I got in the shower and took a super hot shower and just stood in there for a really, really long time. And it felt so good, but as soon as I got out, I was shivering again. So I had to dress really warm and wrap up with a bunch of blankets just to warm up. So that is also a possibility if you underdress. So try to avoid that too. So my guideline is if it's 45 degrees or over, I will wear shorts unless the temperature is supposed to drop throughout the day. Then I would maybe consider wearing pants if the temperature is going to drop. At the very least, at least wear some sort of capris. So if you're unsure of the weather, you do not want to underdress. If it's 40 to 50 degrees outside, I suggest wearing arm warmers or a long sleeve shirt. When it is under 40 degrees, I suggest wearing layers. So a long sleeve shirt, maybe a jacket over the long sleeve shirt would be an example of how you could dress in layers. So if it's 50 to 60 degrees at the start of the race, you could always put some arm warmers on if you are chilly. If it's going to get warmer as you run the race, you could always pull those arm warmers down. So that is a suggestion if it's like 50 to 60 degrees. I suggest wearing something for warmer weather, such as a tank top or a short sleeve shirt, preferably a dry fit shirt. And some other items I suggest that you don't forget during the race. If it's colder outside, make sure you bring your gloves and something for your ears, some ear warmers. If it's warmer outside and it might rain, or if it's going to be really sunny, bring a running hat. The next mistake I made as a new marathon runner is starting out too fast. So this is such an easy mistake, even as an experienced marathon runner, to not want to hold back. So usually what happens is you feel really good after a taper and you have all of this energy and you just get super excited during the race and you just start running really fast at the beginning. You have to be mindful of this and know in your mind that starting out too fast could possibly make you hit the wall later during the race. So it is always best at the beginning of the race to start out at a conservative pace and then gradually build upon your pace as you progress in the race. And then towards the end, if you have what it takes to pick it up, then you pick up the pace. My next mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is drinking too much Gatorade. So you don't have to drink Gatorade at every hydration station, and especially if you are taking sports gels throughout the race. If you are drinking Gatorade throughout the race, I also would get water at the same time so you can wash that Gatorade aftertaste down, because Gatorade, in my opinion, leaves an aftertaste. I realized after many marathons that my body can't handle Gatorade during the race. So I only use sports gels and water now during the race. But you have to remember that you have to figure out what works for you. I know there are runners out there that have very sensitive stomachs, and you kind of have to be really strategic about what works. And the only way you're going to know, you're going to have to do trial and error. But at all cost, I would not recommend only drinking water, only. You need to have some form of carbs during the race. You're just not going to perform at your body's optimal performance if you don't take in carbs. There's really not any way getting around it. You're going to for sure hit the wall. So take in carbs throughout the race, because you're going to feel so much better during the race. Even if your stomach doesn't do well with eating carbs or any type of sugar during the race, it's still worth taking those carbs in. If all else fails, you're just going to have to go to the porta potty during the race. So going to the porta potty is not necessarily going to make you have a bad race. I always have to go to the porta potty during the race, and I know there are runners out there that will not go to the bathroom at all cost. I wouldn't do that at all. I don't think it's worth it. Why would you want to feel uncomfortable during the race? It's just best to take a quick pit stop into the porta potty so you feel better. Next mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is drinking Gatorade and taking a sports gel at the same time. So you want to avoid this at all cost. I mean, it probably even tells you that you're not even supposed to mix it, and I just didn't read it. Do not take a sports gel and a Gatorade together. This is just way too much sugar for your body to process. So if you are taking a sports gel, skip the Gatorade during that hydration station. But do make sure that you get plenty of water to go with your sports gel. So here's an example of what happened when I drank Gatorade with a sports gel. I definitely had more bathroom breaks during the marathon and after the marathon. So don't be drinking Gatorade and taking a goo at the same time. The next mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is not drinking enough water. So I was avoiding the water stations at the beginning of the race because I was not thirsty at the time. Usually they start having water stations about 2 to 3 miles into the race. I do recommend taking at least a little sip of water during those hydration stations. I was skipping a lot of water stations as a new marathon runner, and I really think that affected me in the end. I think it hindered my performance. So do make sure you're drinking plenty of water. You don't have to chug a cup of water. Even just little sips go a long way. So maybe take a sip or two at a water station if you're not that thirsty. But do be drinking water throughout the race, from towards the beginning till the end. So some of the reason that I was avoiding the water stations is because I was so worried that I was going to have to go to the bathroom during the race. And I didn't want that to affect my time. It's not a very smart idea to do that, because this is going to make you dehydrated. In all honesty, I wouldn't worry too much about having to go to the bathroom during the race, especially if there are plenty of porta potties on the course. It probably won't slow you down too much having to go to the bathroom. It might even speed you up during the race if you're not having the urge to go as you run. Long story short, not drinking enough water made me dehydrated and having to go to the medical tent after the race. So if you're worried about going to the water stations because you're going to have to walk to drink, there's actually a way, if you're not wanting to walk during the hydration stations, is that you can just slow your pace down, pinch the top of the cup, and you can still jog, but you'll have to slow down a little bit. And you can just put a little bit in your mouth and drink it that way. That way it's not going down your throat too fast. That is what I have done in many races, and it works really well because I preferably don't like to walk during the marathon. There's nothing, by the way, there is nothing wrong with walking during the marathon. You're still a marathon runner if you do walk. But in my personal preference is that I don't like to walk during the marathon because my legs stiffen up so much and it's hard to get going again. So that's why I like to just continue to try to keep running during the race as much as possible. If you're wearing a hydration vest or belt, I still would recommend drinking water every other mile. My next mistake as a marathon runner is not taking in enough sports gels. So you need to be refueling every 30 to 45 minutes during the race. If you have a sensitive stomach and your stomach has a hard time handling the sports gels or anything sweet or have carbs in it during the race, you will probably be just fine if you do every 45 minutes. But I wouldn't go past that too much because you don't want to deplete your glycogen stores. You want to keep your glycogen stores up as much as possible throughout the race. So as a new marathon runner, I started to realize that I wasn't taking in enough sports gels throughout the race. I think for my first couple of marathons, I didn't take a sports gel until after 10 miles. So starting at anywhere from 4 to 6 miles would be good. The next mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is eating sports gels on the course that I was not used to. My recommendation to you is to avoid those sports gels that you are not used to taking in during your training. So during many marathons, at some hydration stations, they will hand out sports gels during the race for you to take. Well, I grabbed a strawberry banana one and a tri-berry one. I felt like that was definitely a mistake. I was gagging when I was taking it. I think it hurt my stomach instantly. I knew that strawberry banana and tri-berry goos did not agree with me. So that's why with experience, you will start to know what sports gels work for you. Sometimes just know that it takes trial and error and sometimes practice on your training runs to figure out what works for you. So the best bet is to bring sports gels or carbs that you know that you can handle during the race because you've had the practice during training to know what works for you. So the next mistake that I made as a new marathon runner is not changing my clothes immediately after the marathon. You will cool off quickly after the race, so change your clothes as soon as possible. I think in the beginning as a new marathon runner, there were a couple races that I didn't even bring a gear check bag because I was afraid that maybe they'd lose my bag because I didn't want to lose my clothing. Just know most likely they're not going to lose your bag. I've now completed 32 marathons. I haven't had a race yet that lost my bag, so I would just put that fear aside. Take advantage of gear check because you will thank yourself to have a change of clothes or any other post-recovery items that you feel like are needed in the bag. So just from my experience, when I didn't take advantage of gear check, I didn't have any clothes on hand after the race. I was extremely cold and I was shivering and I was so miserable. It took me forever to warm up. And I also think that might have been another reason why I had to go to the medical tent sometimes because I just got way too cold. My lips were turning purple, I remember. And my fingers were turning purple, my fingernails. So there are actually people during the race and after the race that are assessing runners that cross the finish line to check for symptoms of they maybe need some medical attention. I've actually been pulled off probably a few times because I was so cold and they took me to the medical tent and they wrapped these warm blankets on you and they gave me like Pedialyte so I could feel better and not be so dehydrated. I think I could have prevented some of the trips that I made that I had to take to the medical tent because I didn't drink enough and I didn't have a change of clothes. I feel like if I did those two things, I probably wouldn't have had to go to the medical tent. So definitely bring a change of clothes. So what mistakes have you made during marathon race day, or are you afraid of making on marathon race day? Please comment below. I would love to hear your feedback. Make sure you watch the next video on your screen, 5 tips to avoid hitting the wall during a marathon.